There was a moment early in the Ukraine war where a single image started circulating online. A burned out Western tank, captioned everywhere as proof. See, NATO tanks aren't invincible. Russian channels pushed it. Analysts debated it. Comment sections went full chaos mode. And for a second, it worked. Because for decades, there's been this quiet assumption floating around that Russia, when it comes to tanks, still owns the battlefield. Mass production, battle-hardened designs, numbers that just don't stop, the kind of reputation that doesn't need proof anymore because people just believe it. But then something happened. Not a massive battle, not a dramatic breakthrough, not even a single defining moment. Instead, a pattern started forming. And that pattern is exactly what's making Moscow uncomfortable right now. Because Germany's Leopard 2 didn't just show up in Ukraine. It started doing something far worse. It started exposing how outdated the entire Russian tank myth actually is. Here's the part nobody tells you up front. The Leopard 2 was never built to compete with Russian tanks. It was built to destroy them. Back in the Cold War, NATO planners weren't worried about a fair fight. They were preparing for waves. Thousands of Soviet tanks pouring through places like the Fulda Gap. Fast, aggressive, relentless. So Germany didn't design a tank to match that. They designed one to outclass it at every level that actually matters. Longer engagement range, better optics, higher first shot kill probability, and most importantly, a crew survival philosophy that Soviet designs never prioritized. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of Soviet tank doctrine didn't focus on saving the crew. It focused on keeping production fast and numbers high, which works until it doesn't. Now fast forward to Ukraine, and suddenly all those Cold War design decisions aren't theoretical anymore. They're being tested in real combat against the exact type of tanks Leopard 2 was built to face. T-62s, T-72s, even upgraded variants that are supposed to modernize the platform. And this is where things start to shift. Not because Leopard 2 is invincible. It's not. Any tank on that battlefield can be destroyed. Mines don't care about branding. Drones don't care about reputation. But destruction isn't the full story. What happens after the hit is the difference between a funeral and a second chance. We've seen the 2025 drone footage from the Zaporizhzhia sector. A Leopard 2A6 takes a direct hit from a Lancet drone, followed by a 152mm artillery shell. In a T-90, that's a catastrophic explosion. In the Leopard, the turret rear blowout panels do exactly what they were designed to do in 1979. They vent the blast upward and away from the crew. The tank is immobilized, but all 4 men climb out and sprint to safety. They aren't just alive, they're back in a replacement hull 48 hours later. Russia didn't just lose a target, they failed to kill the experience inside it. Now compare that to what's been happening on the other side. Russian tanks, when penetrated, tend to have a very different outcome because of how ammunition is stored inside the turret. One hit and you get what soldiers have started calling the jack-in-the-box effect. Turret gone, crew gone, vehicle gone, instantly. No second chances, no repair cycle, no comeback, and suddenly the conversation shifts. Because this isn't just about who wins a duel, it's about who survives long enough to fight again. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Because early on, Leopard 2 actually did take losses in Ukraine, and Russia jumped on that immediately. Propaganda headlines, victory claims, this changes nothing. But if you look closer at those early losses, they weren't tank duels. They were something else entirely. Dense minefields, layered artillery zones, kill boxes designed to stop anything moving forward. It didn't matter if it was Leopard, Abrams, or something from Mars. Anything pushing straight through that environment was going to get hit. And it did. So Ukraine adapted, and this is where the Leopard 2 finally starts doing what it was actually built for. Not brute force breakthroughs, not charging into layered defenses. Instead, controlled aggression, short movements, long-range engagements, hit, relocate, disappear. Basically the exact kind of warfare NATO spent decades preparing for. And once that shift happened, everything changed. Because now you have a tank that can see further, shoot accurately on the move, operate effectively at night, and disengage before Russia can respond properly. And suddenly, those mass formations Russia relies on start becoming targets instead of threats. And this is where the myth really starts to crack. Because for years, The idea was simple. Russia doesn't need better tanks, they just need more of them. But that logic only works if the fight stays close, if visibility is limited, if both sides are forced into short-range engagements. That's where numbers matter most. Leopard 2 changes that equation completely, because once engagements stretch out, once detection happens earlier, once the first shot actually lands where it's supposed to, numbers stop being an advantage and start becoming a liability. More tanks just means more targets, and that's exactly what's been happening. Not in one dramatic battle, but across multiple engagements, quietly, consistently, enough to force Russia into something it didn't expect. Adaptation, and not the kind they're comfortable with, because now Russian units are being pushed to rely more on drones, more on indirect fire, more on avoiding direct tank engagements altogether. Which raises a very uncomfortable question. If your tanks are no longer dominating the battlefield, what exactly are they for? And this is where the Leopard 2 does something that no spec sheet can fully explain. It changes behavior. Russian commanders start allocating more resources just to deal with a handful of Western tanks, more drones, more artillery focus, more reconnaissance, which means fewer resources everywhere else. And that creates gaps. So without firing a single shot in some sectors, the Leopard 2 is already influencing the battlefield just by existing. And that's the part most people miss. This isn't about a single tank being better, it's about a system that forces the entire opposing strategy to bend around it. And once that starts happening, the myth doesn't just weaken, it starts collapsing. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable for Russia, because the Leopard 2 isn't even the most important part of this story. Not anymore. The real problem is what it represents and what comes next. Now here's where the story stops being about firepower and starts becoming something Russia didn't plan for. Because on paper, the West didn't send just one tank, they sent 3. Leopard 2, Abrams, Challenger 2, all top tier, all dangerous, all more advanced than most of what Russia fields. So logically, they should all perform roughly the same, right? That's what most people assumed. That's also where most people got it wrong, because Ukraine isn't a testing ground for which tank is strongest. It's a stress test for which tank actually works under pressure. And the moment you shift the question like that, Leopard 2 starts pulling ahead in a way that has nothing to do with armor thickness or gun size. It comes down to something much less exciting: fuel, maintenance, logistics, the stuff that doesn't look good in thumbnails but decides wars anyway. The Abrams is a beast, but it's a high-maintenance one. Its AGT-1500 gas turbine engine sounds like a jet taking off because essentially it is one. It drinks fuel at an astronomical rate even at idle. In the mud-choke logistics of 2026 Ukraine, that turbine becomes a chain around the neck of a supply commander. Meanwhile, the Leopard 2 rolls in with an MTU diesel V12. It's rugged, it's familiar, and it sips the same fuel as the rest of the Ukrainian fleet. It doesn't need a specialized supply chain flown in from halfway across the world. It just needs a mechanic with a wrench and a fuel truck. Because a tank isn't dangerous when it exists, it's dangerous when it's operational, fueled, maintained, ready to move at any moment, and Leopard 2 stays operational more consistently, which means it shows up more often, which means it influences more fights. Challenger 2 sits in a strange middle ground, extremely capable, arguably one of the best protected tanks ever built. But there's a catch. There just aren't many of them. Small numbers, limited spare parts, limited training pipeline. So even though each individual tank is powerful, its overall impact stays contained. Leopard doesn't have that problem, because Europe is full of them. Germany, Poland, Finland, Spain, the list keeps going. That means spare parts exist, training exists, knowledge exists, and suddenly Ukraine isn't just operating a tank, it's plugged into an entire ecosystem. That's the real advantage. Not just the machine, but everything behind it. And this is where things start getting uncomfortable again for Russia, because now they're not just dealing with a better tank, they're dealing with a system that keeps that tank in the fight longer. You can destroy one, maybe two, but if they keep coming back, if they keep getting repaired, if crews survive and return, then you're not reducing the threat, you're just delaying it. And delay is something Russia can't afford in a prolonged war. Now combine that with how Ukraine actually uses these tanks, because they're not throwing them into massive armored charges anymore. That phase didn't work. They learned fast. Instead, Leopard 2 starts operating like a precision tool, positioned behind the front, watching, waiting. Then suddenly, a Russian vehicle moves or a position gets exposed, and within seconds, a round is already on the way. Not a warning shot, not suppression, a kill shot. That first shot accuracy isn't just a better lens, it's the PERI-R17 hunter-killer system. While the gunner is engaging a target, the commander is already using an independent thermal panoramic sight to lock onto the next one. By the time a Russian T-72 crew manually rotates their turret and squints through a thermal sight that's 2 generations behind, the Leopard has already mapped, tracked, and fired. It's not a duel, it's an execution. In a world where first seen equals first killed, the Leopard 2 isn't just a tank. It's a predator with better vision. And that vision is exactly what's forcing a change in the dirt. Because when you can't hide, you have to scatter. Russian units start spacing out more, moving slower, relying on indirect methods instead of direct engagement, which sounds smart until you realize what that actually means. It means the tank, the thing that was supposed to dominate ground warfare, is no longer leading the fight. It's being protected. And once your main battle tank becomes something you have to protect, instead of something that applies pressure, you've already lost the initiative. That's the shift Leopard 2 helped create, not by overpowering everything in front of it, but by forcing Russia to fight differently. And when a military is forced to abandon its preferred way of fighting, cracks start forming everywhere else. Now, here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Russia knows all of this, which is why their response hasn't been calm. It hasn't been measured. It's been aggressive, focused, almost obsessive. Leopard 2 became a priority target, not just on the battlefield, but in media. Every damaged Leopard gets filmed. Every hit gets amplified. Every loss gets pushed as proof that nothing has changed. Because if the narrative holds, if people believe Western tanks don't matter, then the psychological impact disappears. But the problem is, the battlefield doesn't follow narratives, and Russian behavior is already revealing the truth. They're dedicating more drones to hunt these tanks, more artillery to suppress them, more reconnaissance just to track them, which means fewer resources available elsewhere, and war doesn't forgive imbalance. So while Russia focuses on stopping a handful of Leopard 2s, other parts of the front become weaker. Gaps appear, opportunities open, and Ukraine doesn't need to win everywhere. It just needs to win somewhere. That's how pressure builds. That's how momentum shifts. And that's how a single platform starts influencing an entire battlefield far beyond its numbers. But this still isn't the biggest problem for Russia, because everything we've talked about so far is happening with current Leopard variants, older ones. Midlife upgrades, export configurations. This isn't even the final form of what Europe is capable of deploying. And that realization is where things start getting serious. Because if this is what good enough looks like, what happens when the next generation arrives? And more importantly, what happens when there are a lot more of them? That's the scenario Russian planners are quietly losing sleep over. And it's not hypothetical anymore. It's already starting. Now, this is where the story stops being about Ukraine and starts becoming something much bigger. Because what Russia is seeing right now isn't peak Western power, it's the starting point. Most of the Leopard 2s in Ukraine aren't even the newest versions. Older A4s, mid-level upgrades, and they're already forcing Russia to adapt, already changing behavior, already draining resources just to keep them contained. So what happens when the next versions arrive in scale? Leopard 2A6, 2A7, a 7V, better optics, faster processing, more precise engagements, less hesitation between spotting and firing. And in modern warfare, that gap in reaction time decides who survives. Then there's the next layer, active protection. Right now, drones and top attack weapons have been the great equalizer. They made every tank vulnerable, but that window is starting to close. New systems are being designed to detect threats mid-flight and stop them before impact. Which means the easiest way to kill a tank starts disappearing. And once that happens, everything shifts back to direct engagements, exactly where Russia doesn't want to be, because that's where the gap becomes obvious. Now, here's the real problem. Russia can see this coming. But responding isn't simple. Modern tanks aren't just steel and guns anymore. They rely on advanced electronics, precision manufacturing, and stable supply chains, and those are exactly the areas under pressure. Sanctions hit components, production lines are stretched, losses need replacing faster than upgrades can be built. So, instead of jumping ahead, Russia is stuck modifying what already exists. Reactive armor, incremental upgrades, workarounds, enough to survive, not enough to catch up. Meanwhile, the West is scaling, and that changes everything. Because this isn't just about better tanks anymore, it's about how they're used. By 2026, something new starts forming. Not just individual vehicles, but connected systems. Leopard platforms linked with drones, feeding live targeting data, sharing battlefield awareness in real time. A tank doesn't need to see you anymore. Something else sees you first. And by the time you react, it's already too late. That's the shift. Russia is trying to keep older platforms running under pressure, while Europe is building something closer to networked warfare. One side is maintaining, the other is evolving. And once that gap opens, it doesn't close easily, because this isn't just a difference in tanks. It's a difference in direction. So the myth doesn't collapse in one moment. It fades quietly until one day it's just gone. And by the time that realization hits, the outcome is already decided. If you have enjoyed this video and want to hear more about military innovations and battlefield prowess, like this video and subscribe for more high-stakes geopolitical content.